China's Ministry of Commerce made an unexpected but decisive move this week, announcing an immediate halt to all pork imports from the United States. The decision came in direct response to escalating trade tensions following newly elected President Donald Trump's imposition of sweeping tariffs on several major U.S. trade partners. The announcement has sent shockwaves through global markets and sparked concern across the American agricultural sector, which now faces a potentially devastating loss of one of its largest pork buyers. China's pivot to sourcing pork from Spain and Brazil signals a strategic realignment that could reshape global meat trade dynamics for years to come. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The timing of China's move could not be more disruptive for American pork producers. Over the past decade, the U.S. had become a key supplier of pork to China, especially during times when domestic Chinese herds were ravaged by disease outbreaks like African swine fever. In 2019 and 2020, U.S. pork exports to China soared, fueled by both necessity and long-standing agricultural trade ties. Those ties have now been severed seemingly overnight, with Chinese importers instructed to cancel existing orders and halt future negotiations with U.S. pork suppliers. This development is more than a tactical change. It's a calculated geopolitical message wrapped in economic policy. President Trump's new tariff policy, introduced under the banner of America First economic nationalism, applied hefty duties on a wide range of imported goods. Ostensibly designed to protect American manufacturing and production, the tariffs also touched essential commodities including industrial metals, machinery, and crucially, agricultural products. These moves triggered retaliatory tariffs from several trade partners, most notably China, the European Union, and Canada. Among the U.S. sectors most vulnerable to this retaliatory stance is agriculture, particularly pork, which is one of the most export-reliant food commodities in the American economy. The implications of this decision by China stretch beyond trade policy. Pork producers in states like Iowa, North Carolina, and Minnesota now face an immediate demand shock. These states had built robust infrastructures around the pork export industry, investing in facilities, transportation, and feed supplies with the expectation that Chinese demand would remain consistent or grow. That assumption has now collapsed. Futures markets reacted swiftly, with pork prices dropping sharply as traders and producers scrambled to assess the fallout. Livestock farmers are already preparing for the difficult decisions ahead, including herd reductions and halts in expansion plans. Meanwhile, Spain and Brazil are swiftly moving to fill the vacuum left by the United States. Spanish pork producers, who have been investing in export capacity and animal health standards for years, are now reaping the rewards of that foresight. Brazil, long seen as a dominant force in beef and chicken exports, has quietly built up its pork industry and is now poised to scale operations further. Both countries benefit from relatively lower production costs, robust veterinary protocols, and crucially, no political trade conflicts with China at present. Chinese consumers may not notice a significant difference in product origin, but for exporters, the shift represents a major reshuffling of trade flows. China's pivot is also emblematic of a broader trend toward trade diversification. Relying heavily on the United States for agricultural imports had always presented risks, particularly given the volatile nature of U.S. politics and its willingness to use trade as a political weapon. With this latest move, Beijing is signaling that it intends to protect its food security by building relationships with a wider array of partners. In doing so, China not only reduces exposure to political turbulence, but also strengthens its bargaining position in global markets. For the U.S., this represents a serious challenge to its traditional role as the go-to supplier for high-quality agricultural products. The loss of the Chinese pork market comes at a particularly vulnerable time for U.S. agriculture, already grappling with rising feed costs, supply chain bottlenecks, and labor shortages. Many farmers now face a collapse in demand for one of their most critical exports. What makes this situation especially frustrating for producers is that pork quality and safety standards in the U.S. remain among the highest in the world. But in this case, geopolitical strategy trumps product excellence. Chinese buyers aren't questioning American pork quality. They're responding to a political climate that has made doing business with the United States more costly and unpredictable. American meat packers and processors are also bracing for major disruptions. Facilities that were tailored to meet Chinese specifications, everything from butchering styles to packaging preferences, now find themselves without a customer. Reorienting supply chains and sales efforts toward other international markets will not be easy. Many of those markets are already served by existing trade relationships, and breaking into them will take time and effort. Moreover, domestic demand is unlikely to absorb the sudden surplus, raising fears of a price crash that could ripple across the entire food supply chain. Retailers and distributors in China, for their part, are moving swiftly to establish new supply lines with Spain and Brazil. Chinese importers, many of whom operate with razor-thin margins, had been growing increasingly wary of U.S. pricing volatility in the wake of the Trump administration's tariff policies. With the trade landscape now riddled with uncertainty and sudden policy shifts, many are relieved to pursue more stable partnerships, even if that means altering long-standing supply arrangements. The logistical challenges are non-trivial, but the financial and political incentives make them worthwhile. This realignment will also have ramifications for global food inflation. As China redirects its import demand toward Spain and Brazil, competition for limited pork supplies will intensify in those regions. Prices are expected to rise, potentially impacting consumers in neighboring countries who rely on those same supply chains. Meanwhile, pork glut in the U.S. could drag down prices domestically, creating a paradox where American farmers suffer financial losses while global pork prices climb. This imbalance highlights the complexity and interconnectedness of modern agricultural markets, where decisions made in one country can have profound ripple effects thousands of miles away. The decision also puts additional pressure on U.S. trade diplomats, who must now reckon with the consequences of aggressive unilateralism. China's message is clear. It will not tolerate being targeted by tariffs without consequence. By cutting off a major U.S. export stream, Beijing is demonstrating that economic leverage cuts both ways. In practical terms, this could influence how other nations approach future negotiations with the United States. Countries that once saw the U.S. as a dependable agricultural partner may now question the reliability of that relationship, especially under administrations that use tariffs as a first resort rather than a last. For Spain and Brazil, the development is a windfall. Spanish pork processors have long sought a larger share of the Asian market, and China's sudden pivot provides the perfect opportunity. Investments in quality control, cold storage infrastructure, and logistics capabilities are now bearing fruit. Brazilian producers, many of whom faced limits on exports due to past sanitary concerns, are enjoying renewed interest from Chinese buyers eager for alternatives to American products. Both countries are expected to ramp up production and exports in response to the surge in demand, potentially transforming their domestic pork industries in the process. From a strategic standpoint, China's move also serves as a reminder of the power of agricultural trade as a geopolitical tool. Food security is a cornerstone of national stability, and control over food supply chains is increasingly seen as an extension of national influence. By redirecting imports and developing new partnerships, China is not only securing its meat supply, but also reshaping the geopolitical map of food. This trend toward food diplomacy is likely to accelerate as nations grapple with the twin pressures of population growth and climate change. In the short term, American pork producers are left in a state of uncertainty and disarray. Many had hoped that the election of President Trump, with his pro-business stance and promises to support rural America, would usher in a new era of prosperity. Instead, they now find themselves caught in the crossfire of a trade war they did not ask for and cannot control. Financial stress among farmers is expected to rise, with some likely facing bankruptcy if alternative markets cannot be found quickly. The psychological toll is also considerable, as years of relationship building and market development with Chinese buyers are wiped out in a single policy shift. Looking beyond the immediate impact, the long-term consequences for U.S. agricultural policy could be profound. Policymakers will have to reconsider the wisdom of using trade tariffs as a negotiating tool, especially when they provoke strong retaliation. The agricultural lobby, traditionally one of the most influential in Washington, may push for a more cautious and multilateral approach to trade going forward. There is also likely to be renewed interest in domestic programs that provide insurance and support to farmers hit by export disruptions. But such measures, while helpful, are unlikely to fully offset the losses incurred from losing a market as large and dynamic as China. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us. What are your thoughts on China stopping U.S. pork imports after Trump tariffs? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.